Well, good evening. Good evening. We're just going to wait another few seconds, just get everybody filing into the auditorium. But I am super excited this evening. This is just phenomenal. We're going to have a fantastic conversation. So just get another 30 seconds or so, get yourself situated, and then we're going to be good to go. And I've got 4 asset managers joining me. These guys are just, they're in the space. They've walked up the mountain before you, and you're going to get to ask them questions. I'm going to be asking them some questions, talk about their journey, and it's going to be good. So let's just give it another 10 seconds or so, and then we're going to go. Okay, that feels like 10 seconds. So, we talk about 10,000 hours, putting in 10,000 hours. What is that? That is basically putting in the time, the effort over and over again. It's about learning to execute. It's about learning all those different tips and tricks that we've been talking about over the past few weeks and months. But you know what? It's also being here and showing up on a Tuesday evening at 5 o'clock when the sun is shining and you're here and you're logging in. And that's amazing because that's part of your 10,000 hours. This is going to be 45 minutes of those 10,000 hours. And you're here on a Tuesday, you're here on a Thursday. We do this, by the way, if you're new, we do this every Tuesday, every Thursday from 5 to 5:45. And we have the most phenomenal conversations because we have amazing people on here. But you know what? It's also about taking control of your destiny. Otherwise, your destiny is just going to happen. You'll just wake up and find yourself wherever you find yourself. Don't let it happen by accident. Take control of it. Take control. Be the CEO of your career, as someone has said. And that, again, is what this evening is all about. And then it's about learning from others who are already up the mountain. We talk about this as though we're climbing Kilimanjaro. We said, look, if you're climbing Kilimanjaro, that's your internship in June or July coming up, like in a couple of months' time. You wouldn't just show up at Kilimanjaro in a pair of trainers and some shorts and just kind of have a go. You're not going to do that. You're going to train, you're going to sleep, you're going to exercise, you're going to get fit, you're going to know all about the mountain, you're going to study, you're going to ask people who've already climbed it, what was it like? This is exactly what we're doing this evening. These guys are already up the mountain and we get to ask them questions. We have to find out what their journey was like. Did they slip down the mountain? Were there bits that weren't quite so easy? Anyway, don't worry. We're going to find out. We're going to figure the whole lot out. So it's a big day today. Look, we talk about this all the time. We make the point that there are just 14 asset managers out of about 3,000 who are of Black heritage, which is that's a shocking statistic, which, by the way, is why the whole 100 Black interns thing started. But we have managed to persuade 4 of them to join us this evening, which, by the way, guys, you should hear the applause. It's rippling around and we are just super, super excited. It's a very, very big deal that they are here. We're going to answer all the questions we can fit into in the next 45 minutes. And so here they are. Let me just very quickly introduce them. So we've got Obe Ejekimi, who is at Carmagnac, and we've got Cyprian Njama, who's at SEI, Omotunde Lawal, who's at Barings, and Ted Jennings, who's at RPMI. So listen, I'm just going to ask you guys, please just introduce yourselves, 30 seconds each. What's your story? Where are you? And then we're going to get into it. I'm going to start asking you some more specific questions. But Obe, let me maybe start with you and just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background a little bit.
Yeah, hi, and good evening, everybody. And thank you very much for your time. And thank you, David, for giving us a chance to sort of give a little bit of intro into our backgrounds and what we've done and how we've got here. I guess from my perspective, I'm a fund manager now at Carmagnac, but that wasn't how it started. Like many of you guys, I come from a family that was focused on other professions, predominantly medicine. And so my pathway to this point was a bit different. And so if I was to give you a quick summary, I would say that I graduated in computer science, joined a software company out of university, ended up at Merrill Lynch, which became Bank of America, and then found my route here to Carmagnac. And hopefully over the next 45 minutes, I can explain a little bit about how I did that. Brilliant.
Cyprian, let's go to you now.
Hello, guys. My name is Cyprian Njama. I'm a director within the institutional group at SEI, where we pretty much manage money for institutional clients like pension schemes. Again, in terms of background and the journey, I studied physics at university. I have no business being in the investment industry, but that sort of problem solving, that sort of interest led me down the actuarial route. So qualified as an actuary and then made my way towards investment and helping my clients with their money.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Tunde, maybe tell us a little bit about Europe Bearings. A little bit about you, please.
Sure. Okay. So I'm Tunde Lawal. I head the EM corporate debt team at Bearings, but like the other guys as well, in a roundabout way, I ended up doing what I do on the buy side. When I was at uni, I didn't quite know what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be. That question of what do you want to be when you grow up? I had no clue, but I thought, oh, well, I like numbers. I might do an accounting degree. So I went off and did that at Warwick, got a graduate job with one of the big four back then, Arthur Andersen. Seemed like a good enough idea, did the professional exams, thought, oh, what other exams can I do? Went off and did a CFA. And along that journey, along that path, I realized actually I do like investment management. I do like working with money and sort of working with clients, but also managing money. I love the trading aspect, and I sort of made my way through various other firms until I ended up at Barings in 2014, and then sort of worked my way up to head the team. That's it.
Well, fantastic. We're going to dive in and hear much more about your journey and how, the highs and the lows of it a little bit. But Ted, let's just hear from you. Welcome. It's great to have you on here. Thanks so much for joining us. Just a little bit about you, your background, and what you're doing.
Hi, I'm Ted Jennings. I'm a portfolio manager at Railways Pension Scheme. I look after our real assets portfolio, which invests in infrastructure and real estate type investments. I came to the UK in 2005 from Trinidad in the Caribbean. My background was investment banking. I did hedge funds, I did advisory, and I worked across equity and debt, and then finally settled in real assets. I'm fairly unique in that I always knew I wanted to do investment management, hence why I came to the UK. But yeah, we can get into that later.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that. I mean, maybe tell us a little bit about what it's like to do your job. I mean, what is it? We talk about being a portfolio manager, or we talk about being in the industry. But what even is that? We all kind of know what it's like to be a doctor, right? We have some idea, or be a pilot in a plane. We have some idea. But Obey, just maybe help us a bit with this. What do you do every day? You get to work, then what?
Yeah, I guess the most important part that I tend to think about is principally, our clients or the people that entrust us to look after their assets give us their money because they believe that we have significantly more experience than they do in that aspect. In the same way that you wouldn't want to do surgery on yourself, you give your money to people like us to try and do a decent job of it. And my daily job is two things. One is to manage those assets in terms of where we invest the money. I'm a global equities PM, so we have a choice of over 3,000 companies around the world that we can potentially invest in. But there's two aspects that I think are key that I think about every day. Is one, how do we satisfy these clients so at the end of the year, the return that we give them is something in line with their expectations? And the second component is how do we manage the risk of that so that when things go wrong, we limit downside, because it's not all plain sailing. And as we saw last year, things can obviously go wrong and you have to manage that. So there's a constant battle of if someone gives you $100, how do you make sure that at the end, whatever you give them at the end of that year is somewhere around the point that they would be satisfied for the amount of effort that you put into it. And that I would say is the principal thing. But if you want to ask about my daily job, there's so many different things, from reading the markets, reading research, reading about the companies that we're investing, understanding trends in markets, whether it's rotations in stocks or different macro things. I mean, there's a whole list, but I mean, that's part and parcel of what we do every day.
Let's just dig in a little bit while I've got you, Obey, just a little bit about, for example, research. Do you research a sector? Do you research a particular stock? How does a stock catch your attention? What do you then look at? Do you go and talk to the company? What kinds of, how do you go about the business of working out which stocks you're actually like, that's the one?
Yeah, so, this leads a bit into my background. So I think all of us have got sort of technical backgrounds to some extent. And before I became a fund manager, I was in what I call the quant side of the business, which was about filtering and ranking stocks. And I think at the end of the day, we have so many areas that we can potentially invest. And my job every day is to try and narrow that down. You can't research 3,000 companies, but I can do a reasonable job of researching, let's say, 50 or so companies. So in terms of research, I would say that it's that filtration process, which is the first part. Which companies do we think we can invest in over a decent period of time without taking too much risk? And then we rely on various different sources, whether it's internally or whether it's externally through brokers and relationships that way, to try and get the in-depth information about a given company or a given thematic, which we think might influence our fund holdings.
Right. Tunde, let me come to you. I just ask you kind of the same question. I mean, what is, maybe not any given day, but in a week, what sort of things are you doing? You're in emerging markets. You know, where does your day job take you?
Right. So the thing with emerging markets is there is never a dull day. I mean, we're investing in at least 60 different countries, and you can be guaranteed there's a dictator somewhere, there's a president somewhere who wants to do something fun on a Friday night or a Monday night, which means that when we wake up, the world, you know, the world that we went to bed in is different. So for me, every day, no 2 days are the same. Every day I come in, it's a case of what's happened in the world overnight. You know, where are we invested? What's happened? What do we need to change? What do we need to, you know, a big part of the job is absorbing a huge amount of information daily and being able to process that at good speed, logically, and to sort of make the decisions that you need to make off the back of that. So you come in every day, there's a piece of news about something in Turkey, something in Brazil, something in Mexico, something in China. You have to be able to move from China to Mexico to Brazil in the space of 10, 15 minutes. And so it's really the ability to think very quickly and process information very quickly. This is what a large part of my job is. And as Obey said, you know, you're the custodians of your clients' money. They give you those funds to manage for them. So you have to do your best to make sure that if you're not growing it, you're at least not reducing it. And so really, this is a big part of it, is making sure that we are making the correct decisions, and the decision that we're making is just as right or more right than the decisions my peers are making.
So what sort of things, Tunde, just staying with you, what sort of things would you be investing in and where? I mean, like, would Brazil be an example? I'm just making it up here, but I mean, like, where would you be investing, and what might be a piece of, I'm asking you loads of questions about what might a piece of news be that makes you think, oh, okay, maybe that's going to affect my investment in some way?
All right. Okay. So it could be anything. Like a couple of weeks ago in Brazil. So we invest in global emerging markets. So Asia, Central and Europe, Middle East, Latin America, Africa. And so a few weeks ago, you had a piece of news that comes through on the newswire, which says that petrol prices have been increased at the pump in Brazil again. And then not long after that, you get another piece of news that comes through that the president is not happy with the petrol pump prices that go up. And the next piece of news is, well, he's going to ask the CEO to step down. Well, that then creates this sort of cycle of events that happens, because suddenly the CEO steps down, and then it changes the whole company's business strategy. Investors worry, the money I've lent to this company, is it safe? Is the strategy going to change? Am I going to get my money back? And then it all spirals. And then the next day you wake up and someone's criminal convictions have been overturned. And suddenly the elections coming up in 2022 are no longer what you thought they were the day before. The elections are now wide open because there's another candidate coming, and it changes your entire investment thesis about Brazil. And this is what happens. And you sort of take that and multiply that by several countries, and you know, you start to get a sense for just how fun EM can be.
Yeah, I'm loving it. So does this mean that it's all just pot luck because you invest, but who knows whether or not, you know, the petrol price is going to go up?
It's not quite gambling. No, it's not quite luck, right? You can gambling.
So you can actually have a central thesis, and you can predict what you think is going to happen.
Correct.
What risk looks like, and whether this is a big deal or not a big deal.
Correct. And this is the key, right? When you put that money to work, that, you know, you are the custodian of this cash. When you put it to work, you really need to kick the tires properly. You need to kick the tires hard. And you need to run scenario analysis to say, I'm investing in this company now, and I expect it to go this path. But if it does go this path or downward path, what does it look like? What do I do when this happens? You know, you have to be proactive in thinking about the kind of risks that could come around the corner and how you would react. And this is the key. It's not just potluck, and it's not sort of gambling, as it were. There has to be a body of fundamental research that supports the investments.
And presumably, you know, pre-pandemic, you'd have got on a plane and gone to Brazil and met with. Presumably.
Yeah, that's a big part of working in EM. You do have to be physically on the ground in these countries. So it's a lot of air miles, it's a lot of being away from home, but it's an absolute key component of being a good custodian of the funds that you're entrusted with.
Yeah, and have you been able to, the last year, have you been able to operate out of your living room? I mean, you can't get planes and go anywhere.
You wouldn't believe the virtual trips you could take. You do a virtual tour of Azerbaijan in the morning, do a virtual tour of Chile in the afternoon, and then the next morning, you know, virtual tour of Brazil. I mean, it's amazing. Zoom is amazing.
Yeah. Without leaving your living room. Cyprian, talk to us a little bit about you. What, from your perspective, you know, what does your day look like? And you know, just tell us a little bit. Give us like the inside track.
I guess just listening in terms of my clients, I mentioned the institutional clients, they do have chunky, I call them chunky amounts of money, because most of the money is to pay member benefits, pensions over the long term. So we're dealing with clients that have 20 million or clients that have 1 or 2 billion.
Ooh,
And
okay, big numbers.
The sort of day job, and Obi mentioned £100 at the start, the sort of day job involves deciding how much of that £100 goes to emerging market, how much goes to global equities, just thinking about the total risk. My clients, they have a longer investment horizon or a longer time to grow their money. But we all know that investors definitely focus on short term. So I'm keeping an eye on the markets as well. I kind of split my thinking into two in terms of investments and the admin. We all know there is admin in our day job. The investment side is keeping an eye on the market, keeping an eye on the overall strategy, looking at the risk, looking at the objectives, if they're close to the objective, and if I need to dial the risk down. And by dialing risk down, it's probably taking money from Tunde in terms of emerging markets, which I know that has been volatile over the long term. I may be sticking some money in bonds or infrastructure or cash or property, those sorts of things.
Okay.
That's the strategy aspect. The administrative aspect is your interaction with the client, almost acting as a therapist when markets are volatile to make sure they're calm and they don't do anything in terms of knee-jerk reaction, and just making sure you communicate effectively with them. So that's kind of the day job.
Yeah. Brilliant. Well, I'm going to come to Ted. And Ted, maybe just tell us a bit about what, because you're not emerging markets. You talked about infrastructure, real estate, that sort of thing. And also you're not an asset manager per se, right? You're an RPMI. So just tell us a little bit about the organization and what your day job looks like, please.
Okay, so RPMI is the Railways Pension Scheme. So basically when the National Rail was privatized in 1992, I think it was, they turned all the pension scheme into a private pension scheme. So we're about £30 billion of assets under management, the majority of which we manage internally with a team of about 120 investment professionals. So my team specifically looks after one part of that money, so just under 2 billion assets under management that invests in real estate and infrastructure for long-term income benefits. So like Cyprian was saying, we've got a very long-term horizon, and we're trying to just, protect our members' investments to be able to pay their pensions long-term in the future. So we do have a longer-term horizon, but nothing that these guys have said so far is incorrect when it comes to how we look at things as well. On a day-to-day basis, you do need to be market aware. And with that long-term horizon, you do have to sometimes have a different lens to reacting to market news. It's not so much what's going to happen tomorrow, but what's the knock-on impact, 100 days from now, 100 years from now, basically. So, the day-to-day stuff is still the market awareness, constantly aware of your own exposures, and if there's a ability to sort of reposition and recycle some of your investments. I would add on the so-called admin side, there's a lot of client reporting and client pitches that you need to do, which are both, as Cyprian said, therapeutical for some people, but sometimes a bit exciting, to sort of have people challenge your views and be able to defend your position and so on. And then the other thing I think Cyprian mentioned as well is being very sort of benchmark and liability and target aware. Because it's all well and good knowing what your assets are doing, but particularly for pension fund institutional investors like insurance investors, you need to know what your liabilities are doing as well. Or, in particular, I'm guessing for Tunde and Obi, where they've got particular targets. If people's expectations are going up, that means you have to do better than their expectations. If they're going down, you could probably dial down your risk, basically.
So Ted, let me just jump in there because you used some words that I feel like we need to know what you meant. So you talked about benchmark liability.
Yeah.
Like, what is that? What is a benchmark liability? And you talk about the assets. Or what just back up in this. What is that?
So let's go simple terms to what Obi mentioned with the $100. If I give Obi $100 and I expect to get sort of 105 at the end of the year, then Obi's target is to generate 5% returns, and that's effectively the target. If I give Tunde the same 100 and I reference a index, a stock index that says emerging market equities are expected to get 10% returns for this year, then Tunde knows that she needs to beat 10%. Otherwise, it was better for me to just stick my money in the index than it was to give it to Tunde. And I'm guessing, if I'll use Cyprian as an example for liabilities, if I know that I need to pay £5 a year for the next 10 years, I know that my $100 needs to generate at least 5% per annum for next, and that's my liability. That means I know the cash flows that need to come out of my portfolio for the next 10 years.
Perfect, perfect. So I just want to ask, Obey, let me start with you. In terms of the skill set that you need to be successful at your job, if you had to boil it down, like, you know, what are those skill sets? Did you have to study STEM subjects? Can you, you know, do you have to be highly mathematical and a mathematical genius? And what do you need to be like a portfolio manager, do you think?
Well, I'm the worst person to ask because I did everything incorrectly. So I'm not even sure how to answer that. I guess, you know, the most important skill set is to actually have a serious interest, I think, more than anything, which is a hard one to explain because obviously lots of you on the call are interested in this. But when I mean a serious interest, I mean you genuinely have to wake up in the morning and be thinking about it. It's not, for me, it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. So, you know, the managing of clients' money and the understanding of markets is something that I think about all the time. And I think that's the most important thing, because if you have that, it will then lead you to do other things and to do all the things that you need to do to, let's say, educate yourself to become better. So if I was to just give you my background and my history, then you can see how it's become useful. I did computer science as a degree, which is not a pathway into finance, but the skill set of being able to write code or program is very, very useful, especially when it comes to managing portfolios and understanding how to filter and rank and screen stocks and so on. So, you know, if you have that kind of background, it's certainly a skill that's going to be very useful. Educating yourself on markets, I know there's been a couple of questions. Obviously reading the Financial Times so that you understand jargons and all those type of things, I think are a way of getting there. But to be a portfolio manager, there is no, I mean, I look across the room that I'm in here at Carmignac, and everyone's got slightly different backgrounds, especially some of the senior portfolio managers. So there isn't really a direct pathway that you must go down, so, which is why I would say that you really have to have that passion and that interest first, which is very difficult if you've not done the job in the past. But certainly speak to people that have been in the industry, and they'll give you an insight into that.
Yeah, totally. Tunde, would you agree with that? Anything you'd like to add in terms of, you know?
I think Obey was spot on there. I think honestly, all you need is natural curiosity and just common sense, really, personally. There is no formulaic degree that takes you from A to PM role. You know, I know some PMs who have studied history of art, PMs who have studied politics, PMs who have done accounting, PMs who've done medieval studies. I mean, it doesn't matter. The common thread there is the enthusiasm and the genuine natural curiosity to learn, and just that ability to think logically, and that's it.
Yeah. Jump in, Cyprian. What would you say in terms of that question? Just what do you need? What's the magic skill? Is there some magic you need, or just like, you know, turn up, be curious, work hard, be reasonably smart? You know, it doesn't really matter what you graduate in. Just what is that thing?
Yeah, I think I've listed a few things down here, and they're a bit cliched. I'll come on to them later on. But for me, I think the points Obe and Mo made were spot on. The sort of passion and the curiosity. Again, I mentioned I studied physics at university, and again, going through the sort of actuarial exams, it was quite interesting to see things like stochastic process and like, actually, that's Brownian motion from physics. So there are lots of things that come across in terms of STEM subjects, or even having portfolio managers in my business that studied history, being able to filter through data. So all of those bits are important, but the bits I've scribbled down, there are 10 of them, bear with me. The first 5, I would say, in the first part of your career, and again, all the delegates would have heard all of this: teamwork, problem solving, being organized, persevering, big deal, and ability to work under pressure. They would have heard it. These things are key when you come in the first few years, in terms of working with your team, getting the seniors to trust you, and those sorts of things. Then the second 5, I almost feel, as you begin to progress in terms of your career. So I'm talking about confidence, leadership, negotiation, communication, and commercial awareness. those bits you can then almost turn on later on in your career. You don't really want to come on day one and be commercially aware. I think it's just that first few bits I've mentioned in terms of curiosity, problem solving. Those bits really will endear you to your team, will actually make you enjoy what is your passion.
Yeah. Ted, what about you? I mean, one of the points that Cyprian made was ability to deal with pressure. This is really hard, right? I mean, I was thinking about the other day, the amount of pressure that in my 33 years or whatever it's been, 34 years, there have been days where the pressure has just been like, almost broken me in two. But somehow you have to figure it out and you have to work through it. I mean, how do you do that? Is that something that
I think what Obe and Tunde and so on have highlighted there about being passionate about it is what gets you through those sort of tough days, basically. If you're not interested in it, it's easy to falter, basically.
Yeah.
But I'll add a couple of points that I jotted down as well. And I think these go to some of that as well. So I wrote down accountability and ownership. I think for a portfolio manager in particular, it's your portfolio, so you need to be accountable for it. You need to have ownership. And that means that you can handle that pressure, basically, because as I said, when people want to challenge your views, when the markets aren't doing what you expect, when the days get longer than you'd like, you have to remember that, you're a custodian for this portfolio, and it's kind of your decision, basically. And speaking about decisions, I think a key attribute, I wouldn't say so much a skill, but an attribute that people need to have is decision making. I remember even in my analyst days and seeing other analysts, they're very good at, providing research and providing analysis and so on. But making a decision or sticking their neck out was something that was a little bit difficult for them to do. And that's fine. Some people make better sort of research analysts and sort of advisors than there are people who make decision making and can take an accountability sort of decision for them. I think we mentioned this as well. You need to be multifaceted. Any day, 2 days don't look alike. So you need to be able to, as Tunde put it, speak about Brazil and Mexico in 10 seconds, basically. So, you need to have a relatively wide scope. But, and I know this might sound contradictory, you need to have a good attention to detail as well. So it's the ability to zoom in whilst also having the ability to zoom back out quite quickly and see how things make connections and so on. So I think those were the kind of attributes that I would say. I agree with all the other comments. I did study STEM. I did economics as my undergrad. And as I said, I always knew I wanted to get into investments. But those attributes that I mentioned there, those are the things that I've recognized throughout my career have come to really help.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I think it's important to say, by the way, that those things that between you've all listed, they don't all come on day one, right? You don't turn up fully formed with all this stuff, right? You walk in on day one and you don't know which way is up. And then over time you do your 10,000 hours and slowly it comes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I just want to talk a little bit let's talk about race, because that, after all, is something that we need to talk about. And someone from Mars coming on and looking at this Zoom call would be like, well, look, I mean, you've got 4 fabulous asset managers, PMs. I mean, what's your problem? There's no issue, right? But we know that actually there is a major problem, huge underrepresentation of people of Black heritage. I just wondered, Tunde, let me ask you. I mean, I think you're one of maybe 2 women of Black heritage who do what you do.
I didn't realize, but
I think
wow.
So. I mean, it's 2, maybe 3, but that's it. So this is a shockingly bad and statistic. What are your thoughts? I mean, why is the situation so dire?
That's a slightly tough one. Why is
It's
the situation so dire? Again, I think specifically sort of Black female, I think it's that intersectionality where over the years, you probably had more people who would be willing to give people who look a bit more like them that leg through the door. As we said, you could have got to come in and put your 10,000 hours in, and even getting the chance to put those 10,000 hours in was a big deal back in the day. And it took a while for people that look like you and I to get that foot in the door to then be able to put your hours in and shine. And so I think that this is the key, right? Where it's people being more open-minded to allow people who don't necessarily look like them to come in through that door and then show that diversity of thought or, leadership skills that, resides in them regardless. And I think, you get that sort of hierarchy where it's, Caucasian male and then perhaps Caucasian female, and then it's sort of black male, and then sort of finally you get the shot as a black female as well. And so I think that that's what it is, but that's all changing now. But the way that I also look at it is, because, you know, there are very few people that look like me, when I do get in the door, it gives me a reason to be special.
Yeah.
So the key there is, it doesn't matter if you're the only person who looks like that. It doesn't matter if you're the only one that got your foot in the door. Be special and shine regardless. And that hopefully opens the door for other people behind you to come in as well. You know, you come in and you be spectacular in your 10,000 hours. And then the next person comes in, they're spectacular as well. Suddenly it's easier to get people like that to come in. And yeah.
Fabulous, fabulous. Cyprian, talk to me about your own journey, and has race ever played a part? Is that something, I mean, what are your thoughts on this question?
Very interesting question and very topical question. I think for me personally, it's been an interesting journey. I mean, came to the UK in '98, and in 2000 was accepted to study physics at Oxford. Again, all of that journey, going through physics, coming into the investment industry, there's been a lot of support along the way, and it's been lucky for me to find people that say, actually study maths, actually apply here, actually go into actuarial, actually think about investment. So I've been fortunate in the sense that for some reason I've found myself, and I come into these sorts of discussions now and I think, wow, I wish I had this when I was a student. But yes, race has played a role. It has maybe the sort of imposter syndrome, as I became more aware of it as I rose through the ranks. But that's also refreshing in a way, because it makes you really think about your decisions and the things you're about to do. But I think to most points, us being in this space is quite powerful for those coming behind, because I can tell my story, and I've been fortunate to spot the odd Black investor, the odd Black person going to a really good university, and they've inspired me and they've just carried me across, and then I'm hoping we all can do the same. So yes, race has played a role, but for me, perhaps I've been shielded by some luck to actually find mentors and sponsors that are of a similar background to me, and they've just pulled me along.
Yeah. Obey, what about you? Did you have a mentor? What was your story? I mean, looking through the race lens, how has it played out for you?
Look, so let's just be straight and honest. You know, my parents were the biggest problem, right? They and I love them to bits, but their strategy was I had to do medicine, law, or engineering. And so, you know, there's a lot of people of our color who are not traditionally brought up to go into finance. So that's the first hurdle. And I think even today, they probably think I do some bizarre, strange occupation. So that needs to change. And I think we need to change that for ourselves, which is to, you know, all of us to start focusing on how we invest for our futures in the same way that everybody else does. So we need to help ourselves on that one. In the industry, you know, I've had no problems with, I mean, I went to a school where I was the only Black kid. So, you know, I shouldn't have a problem with being in an industry where I was the minority. And I haven't had done. In fact, when I joined Merrill Lynch in 2007, 2008, they were firing everybody because it was a financial crisis, and they weren't firing people because they were Black or because they were female. They were firing people because they had to. And so, you know, when you go through that type of experience, the last thing I think about on a daily basis is my color. I think about being as good as I possibly can be to make sure that if they have to fire people, I'm the last one on the list. And I think that, you know, the way you do that and the way you be a better person is use all the resources you possibly can. And that's what I've done. And then the great point you use about mentor, I've had some good mentors along the way. None of them have been of African descent, none of them have been Black. And so you need to use all the resources. And I always try and surround myself with senior people that I can learn from. And if that's a Black person, fantastic. If it's not, it doesn't really make a difference. That's where I think you should be focusing on, because that's where you get the knowledge. And it's the knowledge that if you can get it quickly, your 10,000 hours is a fantastic analogy. But if you can accelerate it by taking and stealing stuff from other people who have already done 10,000 hours, even better. And that's kind of how I see the race thing.
Yeah, thank you. Ted, what about you? I mean, what about allyship? Are there any people that you would say that have been an ally to you as well as a mentor and helped you on your journey?
Yeah, I would say as allies, I would look at my sort of peer group and friends. But but yeah, I've definitely benefited from having good mentors as well, including yourself, David. So, you know, that goes without saying. I was fortunate, as everyone sort of has been alluding to as well. I came from Trinidad, as I said, in 2005. I'd already spent a couple of years doing banking back in Trinidad. So I didn't really have the imposter syndrome. So I kind of thought, yeah, I'm just going to come and do it in the big leagues now, basically. And yeah, I went through financial crisis, got laid off as well, redundancy. So had to take a knock. And as Obe said, you didn't really think of it from a race perspective. You thought of it from a bad timing perspective, really. But then, you know, since then, as I've progressed in my career and I've moved higher up and I do look around and see less and less people looking like me, I do recognize, yes, the role that race plays. And then you look back and I can remember some stories of some not so nice incidents, and you then have to question, you know, was that race related or was it not? And you then start to feel the effects of the minority position that you're in. I would say as allies, I had quite a big group of friends either had come from the Caribbean or met through Afro-Caribbean societies and so on who had seen progressed. And, you know, that gives you a little bit of support group to know you're not alone in the sense that you're doing this. You might be a few, but you're not alone, basically. And then mentors, I would add to it, obviously, there in terms of, you know, they don't have to be people of color. They need to be people who are supportive, basically. And I've had a lot of that as well. So I'm not going to dismiss the role of race in where we are today, and it's still a journey that we need to continue to be on. But yeah, I wouldn't, you know, I would say we're on a good path, basically.
Good. Well, look, we've got a ton of questions coming in. I mean, there's too many to be able to ask because we don't have a huge amount of time left, but I want to just pick a couple here and there. One of the questions would be around advice. What advice would you give someone who's coming in now, Black, young, talented, hungry, really has been given a chance, an opportunity for an internship starting in June, has 6 weeks to prove themselves. You just got 6 weeks and it's going to fly by. I mean, Tunde, what advice would you give them? Like, this is what you need to do to maximize your chance at the end of it of, you know, finding a position or finding something to making something of it.
So making an impact in your time there. The first thing I would say is, you know, you got to work hard. So you come in the door, you're going to be special, as we said, you know, the door's open to you. You've come in, be special, shine. It's putting in the hours, the focus, show the natural enthusiasm, be a good team player, you know, be a person that everyone else wants to be around whilst delivering on the work, you know, not just delivering 100%, you know, strive to deliver more than 100%. And this is it, you know, you're going to be there, enjoy all the opportunities that are going to be there for you, absorb as much as you can. You are there to learn. When you're in the early phase of your career, be a sponge, just go in, be a sponge, and be a sponge that is going to deliver 110%.
Yeah, brilliant. Cyprian, what about you? What would you say on this?
I like the sort of the work ethic side of things. You definitely have to persevere. You have to show grit. I think we've talked about mentorship and sponsorship. I think it's extremely important in those 6 weeks to actually, I think Obi used the word in terms of finding senior people. I was an intern at an actuarial firm, and I managed to basically align myself with some of the senior students and ask them what they needed help with. And apart from what I was actually asked to do, after work, I helped them out with what they needed help with.
Oh, wow. So you would go to them and say, how can I help you after work?
Yes, because it then meant that as I was leaving after 8 weeks, I got an offer to come back, because it's simple. If they know you, they can trust you, if they know you can help them, why wouldn't they want you there? Regardless of, I guess eventually perhaps the race comes in different guises, the race aspect of it, but purely if you put in the hours. I was a student. In fact, as a student at university, you stay awake till the early hours doing your homework anyway. So I was happy to stay and learn and help. And that was where the impact came. I wasn't technically adept or knew all I needed to do, but the fact that I was just willing to roll my sleeves up and help, that made a difference.
Yeah. Obey, would you agree with that? I mean, if it was you starting an internship in June for 6 weeks, what would you be bringing? What do you know now that if it was you then you'd be doing?
I'd hope that we weren't still in lockdown, because that would help a lot. But I guess you know, look at all businesses are people businesses, and maybe I'm a bit more of a social animal, but I have always found that the best thing to do in my career is to meet as many people as you possibly can. You know, at the end of the day, the decisions that are made in terms of hiring are never made by one person. They're always made by a collection of 2 or 3 different people. So, you know, if I was on a 6-week course right now, I would find out everybody who's in that team, everybody who's a senior member of the team, and make an effort to try and meet all of them at some point. Ask them what they do. Ask them, you know, 2 or 3 questions that you think you can learn from, and they will all do it, because everybody likes to talk about themselves. And so, you know, that is just a basic strategy, as well as obviously, like Tunde says, working hard, I think is being key. I think is a sensible thing to do in that 6 weeks.
Yeah. And you know what? Rob Gardner was on here and he made the exact same point, which is map out every single day. You've basically got 6 weeks, 5 days a week, 30 days, every single day, map it out. Who am I going to have lunch with? Who am I going to go and talk to? At what time? When? Just like literally map the whole thing out, and you maximize your chances. No, absolutely. Ted, what about you?
So everything everyone said, I'd just echo, but I'd take a step back and I was going to say, I think everyone should spend some time to just know thyself. I think it goes back to the point that we made at the start about showing genuine interest. If you've got genuine interest in this, the work that's required to put in the extra hours to map out what you can do every day, it will come as second nature for you because you just genuinely have it as interest. Whether that range from being a hobby to, you know, your lifeblood. It's showing that passion thing. So knowing thyself will help you figure out if this is the right thing for you to do, and therefore what steps are required. I saw in the question someone asked about work-life balance. We kind of mentioned that around, you know, as an analyst, you want to soak up everything. I've got some analysts in my team now. I struggle to manage their work-life balance because obviously people are in lockdown and I don't want them working all hours into the morning, but everyone wants to be involved in everything and they just want to soak up everything you're doing. And I love that passion about them. And I think that's what you expect to see in most analysts. So I would say, yes, manage your work life for your mental sanity and everything else. But at the same time, as I said, if you're passionate about something, it's going to be the other way. People are going to try and force you to manage that work-life balance. And then I would also, I thought another question about moving from investment banking to portfolio management. That's part of the knowing thyself. I got into banking because I knew I wanted to work into money, basically. But throughout that journey, I figured out it wasn't just about making money. It was about managing money. I wanted to find the way to which I could look after money and make money work for me. Because, you know, there's that old adage, money works the hardest, basically. So I knew my long-term goal was to manage money so that I could, you know, retire early and that sort of stuff. So I parted my journey based on that. So figuring out what you want and what you want to do as early on as possible gives you that extra acceleration to do the right 10,000 hours, because you're going to have to do the 10,000 hours anyway.
Yeah. And look, we're going to wrap with this last question, but we're obviously dealing with money and managing money and making money work. And we spend a lot of time around money, and money has a way of corrupting you, right? Money has, you spend too much time with money. There's a world in which you end up believing that the more you have of it, the happier you are. And the truth of it is that it doesn't work that way, right? I mean, you guys are smiling, right? So how do you look at your jobs? I mean, do you have a sense of purpose, or is it just about making as much money as you can possibly make? I mean, you know, Cyprian, we'll just go around, but Cyprian, let's go to you, and then maybe we'll go to Tunde.
I think for me, in terms of the day job, we have this sort of slogan around better outcomes. Ultimately, I know that the work my firm does, I do in terms of growing assets will help people in their retirement. My mom is retired, so I've gone through that journey with her for her to have a comfortable retirement in general. And I think the hundreds of thousands and millions of people we invest money for, just knowing that tangible aspect, that it's for this purpose, to give them a sort of comfortable life, helps with a sort of day job. Yes, you definitely want to make sure you're comfortable. You also want to make sure there are other aspects of your life you want to focus on in terms of interest, but it's all sort of tied in terms of making the money for self and also making the money for a sort of better outcome. There is there is an added layer to all we do at the moment, which is around environmental, social, and governance aspects of it. It's making more of an impact to the world as well in terms of how we invest, and that's becoming even more topical. And making things more impactful, I'll say.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because we've been talking about it all the time. ESG, been telling everyone, go away and read up about it. Make sure that you understand it, understand impact, understand social impact. Totally. Tunde, let me just ask you, purpose versus money, how does it all fit together for you? Ah, you've frozen. Okay, while you're unfreezing, I am going to ask Obe the same question.
Look, I think unlike many people, when you get into these professions, I got into it not because of money. I got into it because I wanted to do the right thing. And my sense of purpose is generally that, I was around in the financial crisis where I saw people lose half of their pensions, lose their jobs, and I saw the impact that had on them. But I also saw our industry pay out bonuses to people at the same time. And so that's always been the thing that stuck in my mind, is that that was wrong. And so what is right is to make sure that if someone gives you their money, that at the end of the year or at the end of the period of which they've lent you that money to invest, you give them back something in line with what they expected.
Yeah.
Now, if you get paid for that, then that's issues. If you get paid for that, then wonderful. But that is not the objective. Is to line my pockets first. It's to do the right thing by the clients.
Yeah, perfect. Tunde, welcome back. Thank you.
Yeah, apologies about that. I was going to say that purpose is obviously the overarching thing here. Is that, for me, there's two hats that I wear. One is working with the clients, the pension funds, the insurance companies who are trying to match liabilities that they have to pay people their pension. So I'm a custodian of that money. I want to grow that money so that, there are people who rely on that. And the other side is the companies that I invest in. I'm also a partner for them because I'm helping them achieve their strategic goals, the visions that they have. And as Cyprian said earlier, there's this big push on ESG. We're funding renewable power plants in the world. We're funding transition of coal power plants into something cleaner. We're funding the development of new businesses in frontier countries. These are the things where you're seeing progress and development, which serves a whole community. And also on the other side, you're working with the clients where you're helping to preserve money for the older generation.
Yeah. Totally. And I mean, Ted, let me just ask you finally, just around purpose and money and just getting that balance, getting in the right place.
I mean, I'll happily confess that I came into the industry sort of, as a pure capitalist. Greed is good is when I grew up in the 90s. So I have to admit that. However, I think there's a sign of maturity that comes having been in the industry for a while, having been through the sort of financial crisis, the Euro crisis, other crashes that you've seen, when you realize it's not all about the money, especially not your own money. And as you said earlier, that with more money is more problems. The bigger money you have to manage, it actually becomes harder to, implement a certain strategy and so on. So you realize that, adding zeros doesn't necessarily make anything better, basically. And it's that sense of purpose that helps you through those dark times again, basically, when you look back, because you will get to a point in your career where you're comfortable. And at that point is when you can then look and say, well, do I need to be moving jobs to get a bigger bonus? Or do I want to work in an organization that makes me feel at home? Does it have a good purpose? Does it give me a good work-life balance? All that other stuff that comes with it, basically. So, I can accept that some people are going to come into the industry thinking that, it's all about making money, but you will quickly mature to recognize that it's about doing good with that money, basically.
Yeah, Ted, that's powerful, man. That's very powerful. Thanks for all of you. Thank you for your honesty, your vulnerability, your willingness to come and share and put it out there. It just means such a lot. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this call, I would say the same thing. I came into this industry as a lawyer, then I ended up through some back door, I ended up sitting on a desk and I actually became an investment banker. It was a bit of an accident, but then it was all about, can I pay the mortgage? And then, you end up getting captivated by all the sights and the sounds around. But then you, like Ted says, you grow up and you realize that actually it's not about that. It's about making a difference in the world. It's about making a change. And one thing about this industry, it allows you to do that, because where you have this amount of capital and firepower, you put it in the right place to work, you can make a real difference. You can go out and you can change the world. And that legacy is something worth living for, and something where at the end of your life you can look back and say, yeah, I did the right thing. So if you want to join this industry to make money, I would say, you know what, I seriously would recommend you don't bother. If you want to join this industry because you can make a difference, then this is the industry for you. So I want to wrap there. I want to say, Cyprian, Obe, Ted, Tunde, thanks so much. I can't tell you, I really appreciate that you gave up your time. We all do. And ladies and gentlemen, give them a shout out in the chat if you want to do that. We'll upload the call It'll be on 10,000blackinterns.com on YouTube. It'll be on our YouTube channel. And yeah, you guys have been amazing. Thanks very much indeed. Take care. We'll see you all again soon. Ciao, ciao.